Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that I view this as a very serious piece of legislation because of the potential impact it could have. This is two agencies that have been functioning in coordination for a century now and handling major pieces of litigation and oversight. The ranking member mentioned a couple. I think there's ongoing cases with respect to Google and others right now. There's, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 pending major mergers right now in the United States. I don't know that the Antitrust Subcommittee has looked at any of them. You know, I'm on the subcommittee. If we've looked at them, I must have missed that hearing. But I did want to ask specifically about this, because merging these two entities in this way, or the authority of these two entities with respect to antitrust, is a very significant step. And so I wanted to ask, I don't recall if there were any hearings that dealt with this, either at the Antitrust Subcommittee level or the full committee level, but I'll inquire of the Mr. Cline if there were hearings that were held that addressed this issue.
If the gentleman would yield, I would answer him by saying that the Antitrust Subcommittee has in its oversight of the FTC, exposed many issues with the operations and with Chairman Khan's leadership, or lack thereof. And I would purport that this would be in line with addressing many of those problems that were raised.
Well, let me reclaim my time quickly on that point, because I was here for the Khan hearing. I don't recall any questions being asked with respect to taking the antitrust authority away from the FTC and moving it to the Department of Justice. Certainly not at the logistics of that. For example, how many employees would be impacted with respect to the FTC or the Department of Justice? How many lawyers would have to be transferred from one agency to the other? How many support staff would be impacted by this move? What would be the fiscal impact of that? Because I can recall when the Homeland Security Department was created, I think they spent 2 years working on the legislation to put that together. And it's bigger than transferring the antitrust entity. I'll grant you that, but there was a massive undertaking to take a look at. For example, they had GAO do studies to take a look at what parts should be moved from different departments to Homeland Security and which ones made sense. I note that this bill, you know, speaks to moving authority with respect to certain provisions of the antitrust laws, but I don't know what the analysis is that justifies which provisions would move and which ones wouldn't. And I don't recall us discussing any of that at a full committee or subcommittee hearing either. While I've been here anyway. Chair Khan testified here, I mentioned a minute ago. I don't believe this piece of legislation or anything remotely related to it was raised with respect to her testimony. She wasn't given a chance to respond to it. The head of the DOJ Antitrust Division was here and testified. I don't recall this kind of legislation being raised with him or any questions asked with him about the wisdom of doing this. I don't recall seeing any kind of GAO study in support of this effort, or even whether there's a need for this effort. And let's say, just assume arguendo that it might make sense to do it. How to do it and how long it might take to do it, that hasn't been addressed either. I know there's 180 days here for putting the merger together. That sounds pretty optimistic to me. Even if this were to happen, having a sense of how the Department of Justice works and the federal government works, it's hard to do much of anything in 180 days. And I don't think there's been any kind of correspondence with respect to the FTC or the Department of Justice that raised this legislation and sought their comments on it. And even if your view is that the Biden administration would just oppose this out of hand, I would note that there are a number of heads of the FTC and the Department of Justice Antitrust Division who worked in Republican administrations. In fact, I worked under one early in my career, a guy named Jim Weiss, who was an outstanding antitrust litigator. why don't we try and hear from them as to whether they think this would be a wise move or not? So I appreciate the members' legislation here, but I think I don't mean to be harsh, but not ready for prime time. And I don't think we should take a move this big and this important with the absence of a record like we've got before us today. And with that, I yield back.